The philosopher who chose simplicity over glory, Leo Tolstoy. Why does greatness always demand noise, fame, and gold? What if the highest form of strength was silent, hidden, almost invisible? Could it be that the ones who walked away from glory found a deeper, more eternal victory? Leo Tolstoy was not just a writer, he was a soul who wrestled with the meaning of life itself. He had it all: fame, fortune, and adoration. And yet, he dared to do the unthinkable, to reject the applause of the world in favor of a life stripped of all illusions. This is not just a story about Tolstoy. It's a mirror for anyone who feels trapped between ambition and authenticity, prepared to confront the parts of yourself still addicted to external validation. If you value depth over distraction, stay until the end. Like this video, subscribe, and activate the notification bell, because this journey will awaken a part of you that the world has tried to silence. Topic 1. The Seduction of Glory. From the moment we take our first breath, the world begins whispering promises of greatness into our ears. Fame, wealth, recognition. They are presented not as options, but as the very purpose of existence. To refuse them is to be seen as weak, foolish, or broken. Tolstoy's early life was a dance with these illusions. Born into nobility, he inherited not only land but expectations, the heavy crown of aristocratic destiny. His youth burned with ambition, to be seen, to be admired, to be remembered. But glory is a demanding master. It promises freedom while forging chains. Every novel he published, every accolade he received, tightened the invisible ropes that tethered him to public opinion. His heart grew restless, even as the world celebrated him. Why is it that the higher we climb in society's ladder, the emptier our souls often feel? Tolstoy sensed the sickness growing within him, a silent, creeping death masked by applause and admiration. It is easier to lose yourself in the noise than to face the terror of your own emptiness. Tolstoy, for a time, chose the noise. He rode the wave of success, dazzling audiences, building a legacy brick by brick. But inside, a different reality gnawed at his soul. The philosopher within him could not be silenced forever. Each step toward fame was a step away from truth. He realized that chasing glory was not an act of courage, it was an act of profound fear, a desperate attempt to fill an inner void. Society rewards the ones who play its games. It crowns them kings, even as it turns them into slaves. Tolstoy's heart began to rebel against this invisible slavery. But the battle would not be quick, nor easy. He knew that true simplicity is not the absence of achievement, but the presence of spiritual clarity. It demands tearing down the altars we build to our own egos, and standing naked before the unknown. How many of us still worship at the altar of recognition, without even realizing it? How often do we measure our worth by the reflection in others' eyes, rather than the resonance of our own soul? Tolstoy's story is the slow, painful tearing away of false gods. The gods of fame, of fortune, of immortality. One by one, he smashed them to pieces, but each act of destruction came with profound agony. Every moment of awakening is also a moment of death. The death of an identity carefully crafted for public consumption. Tolstoy's first death was realizing that the man the world loved was not the man he truly was. Imagine standing on a stage while thousands applaud, and feeling, deep inside, only a profound sense of loneliness. Imagine realizing that your own success has become your prison. Would you have the courage to walk away? Tolstoy's greatness did not lie in his writing, but in his refusal to let writing become his master. He began asking a different kind of question, not, "How can I be remembered?" but, "How can I be real?" When you seek to impress others, you betray yourself. When you seek to impress yourself, you betray your soul. Tolstoy dared to seek something beyond impressing. He sought belonging to something greater, something eternal. And so began the slow crumbling of his worldly life. He stopped caring about accolades. He stopped dressing for the nobility. He stopped speaking the language of pride and ambition. But the world does not surrender its captives easily. Tolstoy would soon discover that walking away from glory is not a single act, but a lifelong battle against the seductive voices that call him back. In the end, the true seduction was not glory itself, but the illusion that glory could ever complete a man. Tolstoy was ready to shatter that illusion, and in doing so, he became truly free. Have you ever felt the silent hunger for recognition pulling you away from your true self? Let me know in the comments below. Topic 2. The Call to Simplicity. The call to simplicity does not arrive with fanfare. It whispers. It waits. It humbles itself before you, as if afraid of intruding upon your busy, noisy life. For Tolstoy, it came during the quiet hours, when the applause faded, when the night wrapped its cold arms around his restless heart. He realized that the complexity he had built around his life, the fame, the riches, the expectations, had become an armor that suffocated him. Every new layer of success made it harder to breathe, harder to hear the faint voice of the soul. Simplicity was not a regression. It was a return. A homecoming to a truth older than ambition, deeper than achievement. It was the rediscovery of a primal hunger, not to be celebrated, but to be alive. Tolstoy's spiritual crisis grew sharper. He no longer asked how to be successful. He asked how to be good. Not in the eyes of men, but in the eyes of something greater, something sacred. And goodness demanded sacrifice. It demanded stripping away everything he had been taught to value. It demanded burning down the very life he had spent decades constructing with trembling hands. Imagine standing before a fire, holding everything you have built, and being asked to throw it into the flames. Would you? Could you? Tolstoy did. Piece by piece, he surrendered. He gave up his wealth. He abandoned his titles. He began dressing like a peasant, eating simple food, living not as a god among men, but as a man among men. There was no grand announcement. No parade. No eulogy for the death of the famous Count Tolstoy. Only silence. And in that silence, a strange and terrible kind of peace. The simplicity he embraced was not aesthetic. It was existential. It was not about the outer life, but about the inner one. A life where every breath was a prayer, every step a return to the sacred earth. Tolstoy's journals reveal a man in constant struggle, not against others, but against himself. The temptation to return to comfort, to ease, to the old ways, never fully disappeared. Every day was a battle. Simplicity, he discovered, is not the absence of struggle. It is the struggle against everything false. It is a lifelong war against the seduction of convenience and pride. Society ridiculed him. His own family sometimes saw him as mad. Former friends turned away, unable to comprehend why a man who had everything would choose to have nothing. But Tolstoy saw what they could not, that to cling to illusions is to forfeit the soul. He chose instead to cling to the one thing that could not be bought, praised, or stolen, the naked, trembling truth of existence. In the end, the call to simplicity is a call to courage. To let go of the masks. To let go of the trophies. To let go of the hollow praises that rot in the bones after the crowd has gone. Tolstoy answered that call. And though it cost him everything in the eyes of the world, he gained everything in the eyes of eternity. Have you ever felt the whisper of simplicity pulling at your soul? Tell me your story in the comments. Topic 3. The Inner Collapse. At first, the collapse feels like death. When you strip away the adornments, when you demolish the carefully crafted persona, what remains is not triumph, but terror. Tolstoy entered this abyss willingly. He found that beneath the grand title of Leo Tolstoy, there was nothing solid to stand upon. Only shifting sands of doubt, regret, and forgotten dreams. The identity the world had worshipped was paper-thin. He wrote that life seemed meaningless, unbearable. He wrestled with despair so profound that even the idea of ending his life became a daily contemplation. Simplicity had torn away the anesthesia of comfort, and all that remained was raw, naked suffering. But suffering is not the enemy. It is the gateway. Through the agony of collapse, Tolstoy began to touch something real, something indestructible beneath the ruins of his former self. In that dark night of the soul, he realized that life's true foundation could not be built upon achievements or possessions. It could only be built upon truth, no matter how unbearable that truth might seem. The man who once conquered the literary world now struggled to conquer himself. Every egoic impulse screamed for rescue, to return to status, to distraction, to safety. Tolstoy chose instead to descend deeper. He abandoned the comforting doctrines of his upbringing. He questioned the very fabric of religion, society, morality. He tore down every pillar he once leaned upon, until nothing remained but the terrifying mystery of existence itself. And in that void he found not despair, but the first flicker of freedom. A freedom not granted by society, but earned through suffering. A freedom forged in the fires of total surrender. It is no small thing to walk away from the life you spent decades building. It is no small thing to admit that the ladder you climbed so desperately was leaning against the wrong wall all along. Tolstoy's collapse was brutal, but it was holy. It was a sacred demolition of falsehoods, clearing the ground for something purer, harder, and infinitely more real to grow. He discovered that a man's worth is not measured by how high he climbs, but by how deeply he can descend into truth without losing himself. And so he lived, raw, exposed, wounded, but also awake, alive in a way few souls ever dare to be. His pain became his teacher. His collapse became his rebirth. How many of us dare to let the false self collapse? How many cling to the crumbling walls, pretending everything is fine? Share your reflections below, your story matters. Topic 4. The burden of false dreams. There is a unique kind of sorrow that comes from realizing you have achieved someone else's dream. Tolstoy looked at his wealth, his reputation, his legacy, and saw none of himself reflected in it. The life he had built was a magnificent lie, stitched together from the expectations of others. He had been a good son, a good nobleman, a good genius. But he had not been true. He had mastered every external role, yet failed the one inner task that mattered, to be himself. False dreams are heavy. They weigh down the soul like a stone chained to the ankle of a drowning man. Each award, each honor, became another link in the chain. Tolstoy realized that every compromise he had made, every time he bowed to society's ideals instead of his own soul, had brought him farther from peace. He had built a beautiful cage and called it success. But the bars were cold and unyielding. When he turned away from glory, he was not turning away from life, he was turning toward it. He began to dream new dreams, ones that the world mocked, but that his soul recognized immediately. Dreams of integrity. Dreams of inner unity. It is one thing to abandon a goal you have not yet reached. It is another to abandon a dream after you have achieved it and seen its hollowness firsthand. That is the far greater act of courage. The world teaches us that the summit will fulfill us. But what happens when you reach the summit and find only fog, silence, and the fading echoes of your own hollow laughter? Tolstoy faced that truth without flinching. He understood then, the true summit was not a place in the world. It was a place within the soul, a hidden garden where only truth could take root and grow. Have you ever achieved something you thought would complete you, only to feel emptier than before? Share your experience below. You're not alone. Topic 5. Rebirth through humility. When a man discards the masks he has worn for a lifetime, what remains is shocking in its simplicity. Tolstoy found himself not as a titan of literature, not as a nobleman, but simply as a man, fragile, mortal, and yearning. He embraced humility not as a punishment, but as a liberation. No longer burdened by the need to impress or dominate, he was free to exist without pretense. The mighty Count Leo Tolstoy became the humble seeker of truth. Humility was not natural to him at first. Pride clung to his bones like a stubborn parasite. But through daily acts of surrender, he chipped away at the fortress of his ego. He began living like the peasants he had once ruled over. He tilled his own land. He wore the simplest of clothes, walked barefoot, shared meals with farmers and beggars alike. It shocked the aristocracy. It infuriated his family. It confused those who had once worshipped him. Why would a man renounce comfort when he had earned it? Why would a man choose obscurity when he had achieved immortality? They did not understand that Tolstoy had found something far greater than status. He had found the joy of being nothing. The sacred peace of being just another soul among millions, no better, no worse. And in that nothingness, he discovered the boundless vastness of being. Humility taught him that strength is not the ability to dominate others, but the willingness to bow before truth. It is not grand declarations, but silent endurance. Not towering monuments, but unseen acts of love and sacrifice. His books changed. His words carried a new, painful tenderness. No longer aimed at pleasing critics, they now spoke directly to the wounded hearts of humanity. Humility did not diminish Tolstoy's greatness, it purified it. It stripped away the dross of vanity and left only the pure gold of wisdom. A wisdom born not of achievement, but of surrender. Have you ever glimpsed the strange freedom that comes from admitting you are not special? It is terrifying, and it is sacred. Tell me below. Topic 6. The loneliness of the true path. Choosing simplicity is choosing loneliness. Not because the path is empty, but because few dare to walk it. Tolstoy's life after his awakening was marked by increasing isolation. Friends drifted away. Acquaintances looked at him with pity or suspicion. Society dismissed him as a madman who had thrown away greatness. But Tolstoy did not seek companionship in the way he once had. He understood that the journey inward must, at some point, be made alone. No crowd can follow you through the narrow gate of authenticity. Loneliness tested him. In the cold silence of abandoned rooms, he faced doubts darker than any he had known before. Was he deluded? Had he thrown away his life? But each night, in the quiet of his humble dwelling, a deeper peace would return. Not the ecstatic joy of worldly success, but the slow, steady heartbeat of a soul returning home. The peace of one who no longer needs to pretend. He wrote letters few understood. He shared ideas that scandalized the comfortable and inflamed the powerful. He no longer belonged to any tribe, any class, any ideology. His only allegiance was to truth. And truth demands everything: your comfort, your popularity, your safety. It demands your whole life, with nothing held back. In embracing loneliness, Tolstoy found a communion more sacred than any worldly friendship, the communion with the eternal. Not the approval of men, but the quiet gaze of the infinite. The true path will strip you of companions, applause, and reassurance. It will leave you naked in the wilderness, and there, you will find God. Have you ever walked away from something you loved, knowing it was the only way to stay true to yourself? I would be honored to hear your story in the comments. Topic 7. The quiet victory. Victory does not always look like triumph. Sometimes it looks like obscurity, poverty, misunderstanding. Sometimes it looks like a man walking alone, smiling into the silence. Tolstoy's final years were not marked by parades or awards. They were marked by the slow, steady flowering of an inner world that no power on earth could touch. The seeds he planted bore fruit not in the eyes of men, but in the depths of eternity. He left behind more than books. He left behind a blueprint for the courageous soul, a road map out of the prison of glory, back to the sacred simplicity of being. Each act of renunciation became, paradoxically, an act of supreme affirmation. Each worldly loss revealed a spiritual gain. Each misunderstood word carried the echo of eternal truth. He was no longer building monuments of words to be admired. He was digging wells of wisdom to nourish the parched hearts of those brave enough to seek. His simple life became a sermon. Not a sermon of doctrines and commands, but of example and quiet witness. He proved that a man could lose the world and yet gain his soul. He proved that true greatness is invisible to the eyes addicted to spectacle. Even when sickness ravaged his body, when betrayal and conflict broke his family apart, Tolstoy held to the invisible thread that had led him away from false glory toward a deeper homecoming. His writings after his conversion shocked the world, not because they were clever, but because they were devastatingly honest. He wrote not from the seat of pride, but from the valley of brokenness. And it was there, in that valley, that he became greater than any emperor or general. Not in the eyes of newspapers or kings, but in the hidden annals of the human spirit. The quiet victory he achieved is the only true victory. It is not sung in anthems. It is not carved in stone. It is written only on the soul. And it invites every one of us. Will you have the courage to choose simplicity over glory? To walk away from the clamor and into the sacred silence? your quiet victory awaits. If you dare to claim it. Have you ever glimpsed a deeper kind of victory? One that the world could never recognize, but your soul instantly knew? I would love to hear your reflections below. The quiet revolution of the soul. Leo Tolstoy's greatest achievement was not War and Peace, or Anna Karenina. It was the invisible revolution he waged within himself, a rebellion against the empty promises of a world drunk on glory. In choosing simplicity, he shattered the mirror of public approval and found the unshakable reality of his own soul. He teaches us that the true battle of life is not fought on stages or in headlines, but in the hidden chambers of the heart. To renounce what the world calls greatness, and to embrace what eternity whispers as truth, is the most radical act a human being can perform. Tolstoy walked away from fame not out of weakness, but out of a strength too vast for ordinary measures. If this journey resonated with you, I invite you to honor the spirit of this video. Like it, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell, because every click strengthens a movement of souls who dare to choose truth over spectacle, depth over distraction. And if you know someone silently battling their own illusions, share this message with them. You might just awaken a revolution within their heart too.